Hey, good afternoon, folks. Welcome. We are just about ready to get liftoff on a conversation about data centers here in Utah. Give us just maybe a minute or two. We're letting folks in and folks are joining. So, very happy to have you here. And we will get going in just a minute or two. Oh, by the way, I'm Lauren. I'm the editor at the Tribune, and we'll do intros in just a second here, but we've got some tremendous expertise on data centers, energy in Utah, growth in Utah politics here with us this afternoon. Thank you to all of the reporters and editors who are giving up their lunch hour to join us, as well as the production team who you don't see, but who are working behind the scenes. Okay. While we're waiting, just want to let you know you can submit questions. You can put them in the chat as we wait if you've got them. Thanks to those of you who have already shared questions with us as you RSVP'd. Super grateful. A lot of similar questions, so we're all interested in the same things. I think I'll go ahead and get started, and we can welcome folks as they continue to join as we move through the early part of this call. As I said, I'm Lauren Gustis. I'm the editor at the Trib, and I am joined by Leah Larson, who's an environment reporter who's focused a lot on impacts of growth in Utah. She's also working in a special collaborative and partnership with GRIST, which is a national environmental news organization. Her editor, Colton Lockett, is here. Colton's our Utah Lands editor. And Jeff Parrott, our State Watch, our politics editor, is with us as well. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the team. Thank you for joining this afternoon. A couple of housekeeping items as we get liftoff. This is a new platform for us. So we're using something called Riverside for this chat today. And we hope that it works for all of us. But that will be up to you to determine and let us know. We are looking for feedback. We're going to ask you how the platform worked for you at the end of this afternoon together. But please, if you've got questions, put them in the chat. If you want to request to be on camera, you should be able to see how to do that as well, to bring a question to the conversation, all to the good. This is new for us. We want your feedback. Please tell us how it works for you and if you enjoy the platform as we look to do more of these kinds of conversations as we move from, as you all probably know, subscriptions to a free sltrib.com and membership environment. We want to be sure that we're connecting more. We want to be doing more of these pop-ups, getting real deep on issues that are really important to Utahns. Thank you for your support. Your support enables us to do this kind of work, to take the time to have these kind of conversations. So we're super glad you're here. We're super glad that you're members of the Tribune, and we're eager to get going. With that, I am going to take privilege here with the first question, if you all don't mind, because I think it'll be relevant coming on the heels of Tuesday's election results. And that is, this question, Jeff, I'd love to see if you can take a crack at. What do Tuesday night's election results mean, if anything, for the future of the Stratos project, for the future of the big data center builds that we've been reporting on up in Box Elder?
Thanks, Lauren. Big question. I will try not to take all 30 minutes on that answer. First, I think we need to start with kind of like, did the Stratos data center, torpedo some campaigns this year? We saw two Box Elder County commissioners that had GOP primary challengers that are going to lose their seats. Coming up, we saw the Senate President Stuart Adams, who sits on the MITA board as the chair, the state organization that initially greenlit the project, lose his GOP primary election. So I think we can certainly say that data centers, and maybe particularly the Stratos data center, Kevin O'Leary's project up in Box Elder County that Lee has done such a good job covering, certainly impacted this year's midterm primaries. But I also think it's just maybe a taste, and we wrote about this a little bit in the Tribune this morning, about people not feeling like they're being listened to, voters not feeling like they're being listened to. And we talked to some folks yesterday and reporting out that story who said, yes, the data center came up a lot as we were knocking on doors and as we talked to voters, but it was a symptom of a larger problem, and that larger problem being voters not feeling like their elected officials were listening to them.
Yeah, Jeff, thanks. I'm not sure
What's
if anyone
next, I
else,
guess?
yeah, has got a perspective on that. Leah or
Yep.
Colton, do you think anything changes substantially with respect to the build out up in Box Elder?
I'll take a crack at that. That's a big question at this point. As Jeff mentioned, Stuart Adams is on the MITA board. Him losing his seat, there's questions about what happens with him losing his primary. Questions about what that means for his time on the MITA board going forward. He's also been a large part of. He was heavily involved in some of the initial negotiations. Kevin O'Leary thanked him early on in the process. So he was heavily involved in kind of shepherding this thing through, even before the MITA approval, it seems like. And with the two of the 3 county commissioners in Box Elder County losing their seats, I think there is questions about what this means. We don't know at this point. I think there's a lot of questions about because so much of this has not really gone through any sort of a process yet. We don't have any permits. There's no development plan submitted. We don't really know what the final details even of the project are going to look like. So I think in that regard, these elections probably will be pretty monumental in shaping how this moves forward now.
The train's definitely left this. Oh, sorry, Lee.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I think this was always planned to be a 10 to 15 year project, which was going to outlast any existing political regime anyway. But I think to Colton's point, we never even really had details to begin with. So we don't know what would change because we don't know what the plan was.
That's great. Actually, that's a great, if I could, Leah, just ask a follow up there. I know we've reported on this. What's the timeline for those plans to be delivered or submitted so we have a clearer idea of where Mr. Wonderful may be headed?
I mean, I don't think there's a hard deadline. He can submit his permit applications whenever he wants, I suppose. But once he does, that kicks off a timeline where they'll have to monitor air quality for a year to see what the ambient conditions are. So then the state can compare the air quality conditions moving forward after this thing is built to see how they compare with the background levels. So that'll kickstart a process for sure. But of course, if that lapses, I suppose they can always reapply. So I don't think we even have a lot of details on timelines per se. Maybe Jeff knows more. I don't know.
I've got no new details that Leah doesn't have on timelines. Colton and Lee have already said, we don't have a plan. And so we haven't seen, even what a potential revision post Stuart Adams' letter to Kevin O'Leary would look like. The big caveat there being we didn't have a plan beforehand. So we didn't, we won't see like track changes, right? If we were working in a document together, we wouldn't see like what things looked like first. All that said, the train has left the tracks. Like MITA has greenlit the project. The Box Elder County, if commissioners have done their, what they've approved, like what's in front of them so far. A referendum effort will not be on the ballot this fall, it appears. There are active lawsuits. We'll see kind of like how the court legal system and then the permitting system kind of like gums up the train as it moves forward. So, more to come, a lot more reporting for us to keep doing.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all. I think we received quite a few questions ahead of the webinar, and I know that we are eager to tackle as many of them as we can. Where would you all like to go next? Let's pull from that list.
I can start with how we got here. this was one of the, I think if we just like pull back just a little bit, and Leah, I'm going to need your help here in a little bit. So earlier this year during the legislative session, which our State Watch team spends a lot of time up at the Capitol talking to lawmakers, AI and data centers did come up, not specifically this one about Box Elder County, but just big idea, AI, data centers, managing data, and Utah trying to be a national leader in what federal and state officials call like the AI arms race. I asked Stuart Adams and some Senate leaders during the session this year, like why get involved at all, like we saw where the nuclear arms race went, if that's the comparison you're going to make. So like, why even get in the game? And they said, like this is coming no matter what we do, like we're going to need data centers as we increase technology. It's where warfare is going. I think of Hill Air Force Base and, nuclear power, like the things are already moving in our country forward in the data center space. And so Utah lawmakers wanted to be on the forefront of that when it came to money and getting contracts and gets, what they say is state jobs and like a future economy here in the state. And so it kind of felt like out of our control, out of their, like they made it sound like it was kind of out of their control. They just wanted to be in front of it. Leah, this is where I'm going to kick it to you on kind of like how that is, actually turned to like communities, right? Like they're the ones that see the impacts and see like the changes here. And I wonder if you can explain just a little bit on like how things have kind of felt as Utah gets in front of the AI and the data center race. What's that look like on the ground?
Very speculative, I would say. I don't know if you guys would agree with that, but I mean, like Stratos, Kevin O'Leary aren't the first huge data center project to pop up in Utah. We've got a bunch in Millard County. We've got one that's not as big as Stratos, but pretty big on the south side of the Great Salt Lake in Twilla, but they're all proposed. Like these huge hyperscale data centers. I mean, we have data centers in Utah. NSA came in like the aughts and kind of caused a stir over water use way back then. People were really concerned. So that was our first one. We've had several since then. We have eBay. We have Nova in the Salt Lake Valley, but nothing like to this scale. This only started popping up in the last year or two, I'd say. And I think it's with the rise of AI. So I think like, again, it's super speculative. Will these people or will these developers be able to produce the energy, get the water they need for these massive projects? I think that all has yet to be seen. And right now, when you're in the early stages of projects like these, you can kind of say whatever you want, which I think is why there's so much confusion with Stratos. Is like, it's a bunch of developers trying to drum up interest from investors, I would say. So, yeah, I think that's kind of what has people's heads spinning, as this all seemed to have happened so fast and at like such a huge scale that's hard to wrap your head around.
Do you want me to chime in there too, Jeff?
Go for it.
Lee is 100% right. This, like, especially with Stratos, like without any real details. And I think with how much the public details have shifted just in the 2 months since this thing has really become public. It was a 40,000 acre site, and then 9 gigawatts. And then there was talks about cutting back, and it was supposed to be all natural gas. And then there was going to be a mix of things. So there was a lot of inconsistent messaging on that project specifically. Water use, there was a lot of shifting on water use. This was going to be very little water use, but then they also were going to use 10,000 acre feet near Snowville. They'd applied, and Leah covered this one fantastically. The original 1,900 acre foot application that drew forth like almost 4,000 or over 4,000 protest letters. And I think in terms of like how this has been felt on the ground, it's been very clear that this one, I think, brought the public rancor out on data centers to Utah. We've seen it across the country. I think Georgia has seen this a lot in the last couple of years, seeing it across the South right now. And this was really Utah's jumping into that ring, I guess you could say. But like Leah mentioned, Millard County has been, there's several projects going on, and Leah's been writing about these quite a bit as well. And to that effect, I think at least one of the incumbent commissioners down there as well in Millard looks like they're probably going to lose. And I think that one didn't even make it out of the convention this year. So even down there, it seems, and I know in the primary race, that became part of that was part of the campaign for the challenger. He was pressing heavily on wanting to scale back and slow down on development, and that seemed to have resonated. And I think whether it's water use, whether it's the energy use, the heat issues, or just I think the transformation that these massive projects might have on rural Utah, I think we're just seeing those types of, we're finally starting to see maybe the clash of the communities with these projects coming to heel.
Great, thanks all. I think we've got a question in the chat or a couple of questions in the chat, but certainly one of them that a bunch of folks have been asking, which is centered around MIDA. Who is MIDA? Who gave them the authority to approve this project? And has anything changed with MIDA? As we look at the, sorry, I'm adding this one. The election results. I still don't think that we know. It sounds like we're frozen. We'll work on that. The question, though, from Matt DeLong is, who's MIDA? Who gave them the authority to approve this project? Leah, you want to take that?
Okay. So I didn't write any of the MIDA background stories, so I'm going to go off what I remember. But I think they were formed in the mid to early 2000s because there was, or maybe in the late 90s, because there was some concern that the federal government was going to shut down Hill Air Force Base. So they formed as kind of like an economic stimulus engine to create infrastructure for the military and ensure that this thing stayed around. This major employer in northern Utah called Hill Air Force Base. So they stay around, and they help facilitate construction of some office buildings around the base. But now they've really expanded their mission. They're just kind of like an economic development engine. They take property tax revenue that increases as you develop a site, like from bare land to a hotel or something. So your property taxes would go up because the value of your land goes up. So MIDA takes those taxes and reinvests it back in infrastructure to kind of spur development. And we've seen other state agencies sort of modeled after the MIDA model, the Inland Port Authority is a big one. But we've also seen all these public infrastructure districts that do similar things. So that's kind of what it was. And there was a two-part question there, why is it part of this project? Or so MIDA's mission sort of expanded. They don't just do military things. There's kind of usually some small military tie somehow. For example, they're helping to build a huge hotel and conference center at this Deer Valley expansion in Wasatch County. An X number of the rooms in the hotel are supposed to go to veterans, but they've really expanded their mission. So they're helping to build luxury hotels for luxury ski resorts, roads for ski villages. So I think that's how they kind of landed on this. But I think what you hear the military component being is that this is going to help us with national security somehow, with leading the race for AI. And I think we've also heard some vague talk about how all the revenue collected from it will help build buildings for the military, which kind of stuck in my mind because I think the military is famously or maybe infamously not underfunded in this nation, but that's just some of the things that we've heard from the people cheerleading the project, I guess. How was that? Jeff, you probably have a bunch to add, but.
Leah's right. This all started out of some worries about base realignment, the term that the military and federal leaders were using back in the day, where it was bracking, base realignment. What's out, I think, is really interesting is that I think generally the lawmakers thought and think that this is really important and this is a good thing, and it's really good for Utah. They talk about this every year when we talk to them. They've talked about this as we've asked more questions about what is MIDA, and there really is a desire to make sure that federal business is staying here in Utah, and we get a huge amount of our state budget from the federal government. And to keep kind of like federal money coming into the state needs to do things to make sure we're getting money effectively and then delivering on those promises and projects that we've told the federal government will do. And MIDO is used as a way to speed up that very bureaucratic process.
I'll also kind of chime in on how it got effective authority over this project, specifically the Stratos project. So part of that is the way that this is set up is that they have to effectively be invited by the county. In this case, I believe MIDA approved the project plan, essentially tentative, and then a few weeks later, the county approved, voted to approve allowing MIDA to develop the project area. So the county, in essence, gave them the authority to move forward with this project, and by doing that, they also handed over most of the land use decisions for the next several decades on this project, on this specific project.
And I would say on the invited in piece, I don't know how much teeth that really has, because we saw the Inland Port Authority in Salt Lake City, for example. Again, they were modeled after how MIDA works and was formed. But, Salt Lake City pushed back and said they didn't want this thing, and they didn't want to give up their land use authority. And it went all the way up through the Supreme Court, and the state ultimately prevailed. So I don't know, how much teeth, local communities really have. And we've seen that, the legislature can be a little retaliatory to small communities that push back on them. So just a side note.
Absolutely. And I think just them approving this project before they were technically even invited in, I think speaks to that. And the county commissioners, even they made a point to say that the land specifically was unzoned, which gave them less authority even without the actual MIDA involvement. So there were some other factors that did kind of factor into this. But yeah, there's the process of this is all very unique. I think very unique to Utah in this regard, this MIDA process and getting the land use approval. So it's been very obscure over the last several decades, but it really became a very big point of contention, both in these political races, but I think just for the public to kind of get a very, I think, rapid, or better way of saying this is kind of getting a very up close and personal view of what MIDA does, and in a way we just hadn't seen, even with the Deer Valley Resort. I think we'd seen that a little bit, but nothing to this extent, nothing with this kind of public outcry.
Yeah, that's great context, Colton. Thanks. Want to apologize to folks who are still having buffering issues. We're doing our best. Like I said, it's a new platform, so we may or may not be with it in the future, depending on how we can navigate this. But we thank you for your patience and staying with us. Jeff, I think you had a question you wanted to direct us towards as it pertained to some of the folks who had left questions ahead of the webinar about water, and maybe for Leah. So I'm going to hand off to you, and I'm going to hand off to you kind of officially and for good. Sadly, I've got a 12:30. I've got to go. But I've enjoyed this conversation, and I'm going to watch the rest of the recording as soon as I can. So anyhow, thanks, everybody. Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks, Lauren.
Yeah.
Water, Leah. As you know, folks are worried about what's the water consumption and use and diversion going to be like in Box Elder County. Something that I think I didn't quite understand at first, and I'm asking you for a fact check here, is the water on that property as it flowed downstream necessarily wasn't going to the Great Salt Lake already. Is that true?
Ish. I mean, it would flow underground, recharge aquifer, and eventually make its way to the Great Salt Lake. So it's all tied,
Yeah.
Water basins, watersheds are all connected. And it is very, very close to the Great Salt Lake, so it's hard to think 100%. It wouldn't have any impact,
I think of Kevin O'Leary saying well, the water wasn't going there anyway, and we'll build, we'll build a pipeline, which is the solution for all of our water problems.
I mean, I think that's what you hear from people trying to tout big projects like this, is they'll say something that's basically true, but like, however, you know what I mean? So like maybe the water wasn't directly going in a stream that went right to the Great Salt Lake before, although it may have been, we don't know. It is part of that greater basin, and it's all interconnected, especially with that proximity to the lake for sure.
Sorry, Lauren called me, but I think it was an accident. Thank you. So
Yeah.
yes, there would be impacts to any amount of consumption there in Box Elder County would at a data center would then be water that's not going to.
Right. And not just in Box Elder County, but anywhere in the watershed. Like ultimately, it's all connected. So a data center in Wasatch County, a data center in Utah County, it's all connected. So.
Okay.
I think one thing about the water consumption aspect too with this is that maybe didn't get as much public attention. You know, whether or not this thing was going to be like using recirculated, like closed loop cooling systems, that's become kind of all the rage in the data center world right now to say that they don't use that much water. As Leah pointed out in one of those early stories, that initial application for about 2,000 acre feet was going to be for a data center as well as for natural gas generation and like steam generation in natural gas plants. And so it becomes a little more difficult to calculate like how much these data centers might be using when we're talking about the scale of these natural gas plants that they're all starting to use more and more, because it's a faster, easier way to get energy, kind of the massive amounts of energy that these campuses need. So those are all the other factors that go into it. And those are, you know, if it's steam use, it's not necessarily ever really going to make its way back. So I just think that when it comes to like water use, it's a much more complicated than calculation than just like, well, we fill up this pipe and we never really use water again. There's so many other factors that go into it.
Yeah, even just saying closed loop, like, well, we need to see the specific technology because you can still use a lot of water with a closed loop system, and like how often you flush it, and it's just, yeah, right now it's all very speculative.
And with Utah, there's no real regulation that they have to use a closed loop system. There's nothing necessarily preventing them from potentially going with an evaporative cooling system or some mix of them, right? So
Right.
I think that's going to be maybe a big point going forward is how does Utah start to get its hands on regulating these developments that, when allowed, can use incredible amounts of water in the entire process, whether it's the construction or the natural gas plant aspect or all of these things.
Right. And I will say, to Utah lawmakers' credit, they did pass a bill this last session that's going to require these big data centers to report their water use. But I guess how that comes out remains to be seen. Like, is it going to be confidential? Or are they going to be able to tweak their numbers? Like, what kind of oversight is there going to be? I think we saw in Eagle Mountain, for example, like, the reason I've been able to report on the water use of data centers up until this point is because they usually connect to a public water system. So I can go to the utility departments, just ask, like, how much water did this property use? But in Eagle Mountain, we saw that Meta reached some agreement with the city where they don't have to disclose that. And they're allowed to disclose it themselves in their like annual reports and whatever measurement or mechanisms they want to, but it's not really as valuable as like getting it from the water provider, I would say.
More transparency than we have even on golf courses here in the state.
Yeah, that's true. You can't get water use from the golf courses using the same methods, but yeah, they're not disclosing it every year, that's for sure.
Yeah. So as we talk about kind of like what the data centers use, one of those things is they will be collecting data. And there was a question about what kind of data would be being collected. I'll take a first swing at this, and then I can pass to you guys if you have more. The answer right now, the Box Elder County Data Center project, we don't really know what data would be in there. The data that like the data centers use and collect and store is all based on the users of the data center. So if someone like an Amazon were, you know, to invest in this project, they would be collecting data like your shopping cart list and credit card data and that kind of stuff. if someone like a government, like a military contractor, it could be data that's like signals intelligence, like foreign cell phone records and that kind of stuff. So until we kind of see again what a plan looks like, to see who the investors are in this project, to see who gets the contracts to use the hardware here, we won't really know like what data is being stored. The follow-up question there was like, would that make Utah a foreign military target, like something that would, like put, make Utah a little bit more red on the map? I'll say we've got Hill Air Force Base already down the street, so I don't think a data center would make us any more of a target than Hill Air Force Base, and then all of like the nuclear weapons management that happens here in the state. So
yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, but even at full build, when it's like all occupied, there's no way we'll know who their clients are, right? Because they're not like a public entity that we could submit a records request to, right? Like we'll never see the contracts for who is renting servers from the site, right?
that's a good question. We'll certainly see who's like hiring more, and like there's like other ways you could get to that information. If BAE puts out 100 new jobs for data management, and like that might be a tell, but I really don't know, again, until we see contracts, until we see like what lawmakers make public, like we won't really know. That's a good point, Leah.
I think there's a question on how the public can keep pushing back on the project. Do we want to go there? That's
Take a
probably the
swing.
only other thing I know of.
Go for it.
So we did get a question about how like what can the public do to keep fighting this, and like why we don't advocate for fighting for or against as reporters. If you want to get involved, I would say there's a lot that still has to happen before this thing even breaks ground. We mentioned at the top, like they're going to have to apply for air quality permits. So there will be a process for the public to weigh in on the air quality permits. There will be a process where they'll have to apply for not just water rights, which the public is very aware apparently on how to participate with that. If the 4,000 protests filed show us anything. So there will be more opportunities to do that. But there'll also be water quality permits, especially if they are going to discharge into the Great Salt Lake. They're going to have to meet a lot of requirements for discharge, just discharging into the environment in general. They will have to get approvals from the state and federal government. So there will be opportunities to weigh in that way. However, I will say that if you want to participate in these processes, they don't really consider comments such as like, I don't like data centers, don't approve this. It's going to have to be more substantial than that. Like, for example, the state engineer, she considers water rights. She'll need to consider, is this thing even economically feasible? So if you have any insight that way, you could put that in. Or if you're like an engineer who really understands pollution controls and you think that the pollution control measures aren't going to meet state air quality standards, you could submit a comment like that. So those are some ways you can still weigh in. There's also some, I'm sure, still to be had on the local government level, right, Jeff Colton?
Absolutely. And what, Leah, like laws change, roughly 1,000 times a year, 500 times a year. What happens to Utah's air quality and water quality laws can always change, get tighter, get more or less restrictive. What Box Elder County commissioners have to say moving forward, I don't know, like what, because this is a MITRE project, I'm not sure. We've talked about this a little bit already, like what local political leaders can do. But our state leaders certainly get feedback all the time in their, at public hearings and through emails and through, phone calls.
I'll be genuinely curious to see what the reaction is to these political fallout of this too. Do Utah's politicians see what happened in Box Elder County with Stewart Adams, with the Millard County commissioners? Do they see that as a message from Utahns to put more restrictions or put more regulations on these things? Maybe make the BIDA process more transparent. I think that that's where what I'm going to be kind of keeping an eye on is like, what are the reactions to both the public backlash and the political backlash that has happened on this.
I'm super interested in like the societal discussion here too on like, if you want AI on your cell phone, we need data processing centers that can give you AI technology on your cell phone. And we need the metals and the hardware that comes out of the ground that gets mined all over the world and even here in Utah to put into those cell phones and put into your cars with touchscreens. And there's just so much. There's like a bigger, I think, like, in the journalism world, 10,000 word New Yorker style piece to do here that is not our job as a local newspaper. But I'd love to read a book about just kind of like where we're headed on, like chasing technology to infinity and like what that means for us.
I hear you on that, but I wonder if part of this backlash is partly due to, like, I talk about this with my friends sometimes, right? If you look at your day-to-day life, has AI made it fundamentally better or worse? Like, I just feel like the internet has turned into slop. Most people can't look at AI, or maybe they don't realize the extent that AI is used in their daily lives, but they can't really point to anything like, oh, I see the point of all of this. But maybe I'm wrong. Like, I would love to hear from the chat. Maybe I'm totally wrong on that.
Stuart Adams was using it as campaign ads. Like there was AI videos of him, hugging lions and doing Indiana Jones stunts, and it didn't work, but like they were interesting to watch.
Well, I'm pretty sure they used AI to do the mock-ups of the data center. Like those drawings. They look like AI to me, but
I think one of the questions that jumped out to me was, when did people know about this project? Because I think for the public, it really felt like it was something that came out of nowhere in late April. And I think in some respects, that's absolutely true. But there were certainly people that did know. Jeff, if you want to, Jeff or Leah, whichever one of you want to take that on, but I know we've done some reporting on this.
Like on how long did state leaders know? Late last year is our best guess from what we can tell in public records that Kevin O'Leary was reaching out to state officials and, taking photos behind Governor Cox's desk. And so, but folks knew during the legislative session. All of the top state leaders knew during the legislative session this year that this was something coming down the water pipe, if you will, and it didn't really ever come up. And we've got a team of reporters that spend 10 hours or more up there every day, and we didn't hear much about it.
Yeah, I'd say it landed on my radar as a reporter. I think it was like early March, I want to say, or maybe late February. I'm pretty sure it was early March because someone filed for that water right change application around then. But it was like such a low quantity of water. And there's like so many of these speculative data centers popping up all over the state. You don't know how many are like serious or how far along in the process they are. So it's just hard to like jump on and report on every single one of them. But I did see like Bar H application way back in March and just kind of put a pin on it to see what happened. And then it blew up. I was like, oh, this is bigger than I thought.
And O'Leary, his company put out a press release in like mid-February, but with very little, even fewer details than we know at this point. But in that regard, he thanked in that press release, he had a statement thanking President Adams, Governor Cox, a few others. But again, the details in that press release were vastly different than what was approved later on in April. So things changed quite a bit in those several months. The scale of the project increased substantially from what was initially like somewhat announced. I don't even know if they called it a data center in the in the press release. I think they just called it like a computing campus, something else, some other phrase for it. But I think at the point is that this is something that was certainly in the works, that involved many of the state's top politicians. And then I think, but for the public, it certainly felt like it was just put very much in front of them with very little time to react.
Let's do one more question. And Leah, sorry to start with you or Colton. I'm interested in like what you guys are reporting on next. So like what are you working on next? I guess I'll start so you guys give you guys some time to think. I know I have started reporting out today because I've got a couple reporters off after a couple crazy days of election coverage. I'm like, what is Stuart Adams' role with MITA going to be moving forward? And so right now, MITA board members sit on the board for 4 years. They're appointed either by the governor, who has a literal handful of appointments he can make with some amount of parameters. The Senate president gets to make an appointment, and the House Speaker gets to make an appointment. Senate President Stuart Adams, now the outgoing, Senator Adams, from best we can tell, had appointed himself to his most current role based on public records. And so I'm interested to see whether he makes a new appointment before his term is up, whether the governor would appoint him in one of the governor's handful of roles as someone that's been on MITA since around 2008. I can see why state officials would want to keep some amount of inherent knowledge, or, if that was something they were interested in, or starting fresh, like the voters have certainly said they don't want him around. I can see why for political appointments, you might not want to put someone back on a board after they've been voted out of office. So we don't know yet. I've started asking questions. I've sent emails out to the Senate. I've sent emails out to MITA asking for a little bit more clarity. So hopefully I'll have a better answer for us moving forward. Leah, what do you think? What are you working on?
Well, I'm a little more hemmed in than you since I just cover environment, but definitely going to be, I'm still checking in all the time with the Department of Environmental Quality to see if they've filed for permits. I check in with the Division of Water Rights to see if they filed for more water right applications, because what they've said, just like publicly, is that they want 3,000 in Hansel Valley, and then they have like 10,000 under contract near Snowville. That's going to be a lot of water rights. So we'll have to track that paper trail and see. I'm also just interested, why do they keep applying and then rescinding them? Is that public pressure? Is it something else? So that's maybe a future story if we find anything interesting there.
Super interesting.
I'm really, one thing that has started, that happened, I think, in the immediate aftermath of Box Elder was other counties seeing the writing on the wall and starting to look at moratoriums, bans. We're seeing this across the West right now, especially in arid states like Utah. Either pauses, 6-month moratoriums. Some places are starting to already impose outright bans on data centers in the West. And I'm curious, I'm keeping an eye on it. Iron County was one of the first in the state to put in a 180-day moratorium. And that was within a couple of weeks after the Box Elder County, or the Stratos project, really kind of essentially blew up publicly, or came on the public light. A couple others have already started proposing it. There's more in the works. I want to keep an eye on and kind of start to take a look at like just how is Utah's like local governments trying to get out in front of this, to maybe not get caught with what happened in Box Elder, where they said their hands were basically tied behind their backs. They didn't have much. So we're starting to see, I think, the kind of the longer tendrils of that starting to kind of filter out into the rest of the state. And other than that, like, again, I think the continued potential political fallout that comes with this, whether it's, in the elections, looking at how this changes the local government aspect. So it's going to be really kind of fascinating to see how Utah approaches data centers. And I think we can look back to the rollout of the Stratos data center as like a kind of a real, effectively, I don't want to say a breaking point, but a real kind of point of demarcation where things took a real shift.
Kevin said as much, Colton, like when you and I talked to him last, about lessons learned here on kind of like how you roll out these to the public and, some amount of effort of making it a more public involved in process. Another thing you said during that last call, Colton, that I keep thinking about is these properties are like business infrastructure, right? They're business buildings essentially, and then they get filled with contractors that want to use the data or want to use the data storing facilities. And I keep thinking about like, are we either too early in trying to build so many of these facilities? Are we not building enough based on the data needs? Like, I don't have a good answer yet on that either. And I do think it's interesting that Utah is wanting to double, at least Utah state leaders are wanting to, again, be at the front of the AI and data race. And it certainly seems like an investment. We'll see, down the road, whether it's a good or a bad one.
I have a question for you guys since you're so familiar with Utah politics. What do you think it was about this this data center that really kicked up the public's consternation? Because like we said, there's been so many data centers, even some similar in size, that have been proposed all over the state, but this was the one that, maybe it was like the support from like a government agency, but you have the one in Tooele that's supported by the Inland Port Authority. So I don't know. Why do you guys think this one really struck a chord?
I can try to take a swing at that. I think Jeff's team did a fantastic story today about the, I think maybe people feeling like they weren't heard in the state and seeing like kind of talking about like the incumbents that lost, at least at the state legislative level. I think this was a project that kind of lays that bare. A project that again came onto the public within, people had a day or two to respond essentially before this project was approved by MIDA. So I think a lot of the lack of transparency around it, and the frankly national attention that it drove, I think really brought it to light. Like you mentioned, like there are I think the entire data center complex down in Millard is supposed to be at full build out 10 gigawatts. So technically even bigger than what Stratos was going to be when it was kind of rolled out.
And they don't have a lot of water down there either.
They don't, but again, I'll say like the fall, and this is going to be hard to parse out eventually. But did the fallout in Millard County's commission's elections, was that because of the data centers down there, or was it because of the public attention that came with the Stratos that then fed over into the Millard and kind of like were people fed up at that point? I will say that like one of the commissioner's opponents made it a big part of his campaign, the data centers, and it seems like the public perception, I think, or just like the public viewpoint on data centers has taken a really negative shift. So I don't know it's hard to say what it was. Maybe it was the fact that it was a celebrity investor, the lack of information. I think the complete changing of details constantly. You had a really good example was Governor Cox coming out saying that people need to stop worrying so much. We need to be able to move this fast. And then like days later saying this was the rollout was bad. We need to scale it back, called for, said they were scaling the project back. So I think just like all of the kind of like obfuscation, people probably felt like they didn't know what to believe at that point. I think that certainly could play a role into why people really kind of latched onto this project.
Not to sound like the politics and the journalism dork again, but like there's certainly a book to write here on the perfect storm that I think happened. There's national data center pushback that is making national headlines when states make decisions on this stuff. There's pushback against AI, which is inevitably the kind of technology that'll fill these data centers. There's a Senate president who for years now has had some decisions, from COVID to laws that impacted his family members that he's changed, to real estate deals that he allegedly profited from, in a primary election against a a good GOP challenger that had some name recognition already in the area that was willing to spend the time to go out and knock doors and answer hard questions and have hard conversations. There was just like so much going on in this race and around this data center. And then you put it right beside the Great Salt Lake, which has just been the politics and environment headline for years now in Utah. And I think Utahns don't feel like enough's being done. They see what air quality looked like yesterday. And yes, it was because of wildfires, but it doesn't feel that much different than the bad air quality days we get from the dust from the lake. And it's a good reminder of like what that feels like. And so I think there is just a perfect dust fire smoke storm in this election. And the results we started hearing a couple weeks ago. Gerke came to me after having an off the record conversation with some political consultants and saying like, man, it's going to be close. And I thought he was kidding. I thought this was expectations management from a campaign or from politicians that are supportive of Adams, because expectations management is always part of this campaign and elections process where, oh yeah, it's going to be close. And then you get to do like the blowout story a few weeks later. And that wasn't it at all. Like we knew pretty shortly after 8 o'clock that he had lost that race.
Yeah, I've lived in Utah most of my life, and I don't think I've ever seen an issue, especially an 11th hour issue, right, cause this much political upheaval.
Yeah. But we're about at an hour. One, I'd like to apologize for whatever amount of to the audience for any amount of technical issues we've been having. This is going to be recorded. We will be sending this out to you. We are always so abundantly grateful to get a chance to talk to you. I know I've had a chance to do this with the legislative session and a couple other events. So thank you so much for tuning in. Colton, Leah, you two rock so much, and it's been great to talk to you this afternoon. For the audience that called in, when you leave, you're going to get a pop-up. It's going to look, I think, like a pop-up that you would get like if you like, did you enjoy our website? Did you buy what you wanted? But it's going to be like, did you enjoy this, and would you want to do more and later, and like what times like work best? Like that's from us. That's from the Tribune. We'd love to hear from you. We want to keep doing these. We will figure out the technology to make sure they're working. But we want to hear from you. We want to keep doing them. So please fill out that survey. And we're super grateful for you. We'll talk to y'all later.
Bye, everyone.